The sun dipped low, painting Crestview University in a deceptive glow of gold. Students crisscrossed the campus, their laughter masking a darker truth that lurked just beneath the surface. For some, success was measured in late-night study sessions and hard-earned grades. For others, it came at a far steeper price, one that couldn't be paid with textbooks or tuition fees. In the shadows of this prestigious institution, a sinister exchange thrived. Professors held the keys to academic triumph, and for a select few, the cost of admission wasn't just sweat or intellect, it was something far more personal, far more devastating. This is the story of two women, Amara, who made a choice she could never take back, and Daniela, who refused to play by the rules. Their paths diverged, but their battles were the same, against a system that demanded more than they were willing to give. What would you do if your future hung in the balance and the price was your dignity? Stay with me. This is a story you won't forget. Chapter 1. Amara's Ambition. Amara Okoye wasn't just another student, she was a survivor. Born in a small village where dreams rarely stretched beyond farmland and local markets, she had clawed her way into Crestview University with sheer determination. Her parents, humble maize sellers, had poured everything into her education, believing that a university degree was their family's ticket out of poverty. On the day she left for the city, her mother's hands trembled as she pressed a worn Bible into her palm. "Make us proud," she whispered. Amara had nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had promised herself that she would not fail. She arrived on campus with a suitcase full of secondhand clothes, a well-worn Bible, and a hunger to succeed. The towering university gates, the bustling students, the grandeur of the lecture halls, it all felt surreal, but she had no time to be overwhelmed. From day one, she immersed herself in her studies, knowing that every test, every assignment, every lecture was a step toward securing her future. An unyielding determination. Unlike many of her peers, Amara had no room for distractions. While other students juggled social lives, relationships, and parties, she lived in the library. The dim glow of her hostel lamp was a nightly companion as she scribbled notes, her fingers cramping from endless revisions. When her roommates whispered about campus gossip, who was dating whom, who had bribed a lecturer, which girl had upgraded her wardrobe overnight, Amara remained silent. She wasn't here for shortcuts or games. "Don't you get lonely?" one of them had asked one evening, watching as Amara flipped through a thick textbook. "Lonely?" Amara chuckled. "I don't have time for loneliness. My family is counting on me." She had no boyfriend, no flings, no distractions. Love, she told herself, could wait. Success couldn't. And yet, as the semesters rolled by, she noticed a disturbing pattern: the Golden Girls. Some students, particularly certain girls, never seemed to struggle. They skipped classes, barely opened a book, yet walked around with a quiet confidence, their grades pristine. They carried designer bags, wore expensive shoes, and had a look of quiet assurance that Amara couldn't understand. At first, she dismissed it. Maybe they were just naturally brilliant. Maybe they had private tutors, but the whispers were persistent. "She's a golden girl, Dr. Easy's favorite. She never reads, but she gets A's. You know how it works. If you want to graduate with first class, you better be willing to do what it takes." Amara scoffed at the rumors. "Not me. Never me." Then came Dr. Chukwudi Eze. The fall Dr. Eze wasn't just a lecturer, he was a gatekeeper. Charismatic, well-dressed, and dangerously intelligent, he moved with the arrogance of a man who knew he was untouchable. He controlled one of the most crucial courses in her department, social dynamics. Amara had poured her soul into her midterm paper, a detailed, well-researched masterpiece. But when the results came back, her heart plummeted. Double plus. She stared at the paper, her vision blurring. How? She had studied, prepared, done everything right. Summoning courage, she went to his office. She expected an explanation. Instead, she got a smirk. "You're a smart girl, Amara," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But intelligence alone doesn't guarantee success. You need to learn how the world works." He slid a note across the desk. "My house, 7 p.m. tomorrow." Her breath caught. Number. But what were her choices? Appeal? Waste weeks fighting a system designed to silence girls like her? Lose her scholarship? That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mother's words echoing in her head. "Make us proud." At 6:59 p.m. the next day, she stood outside Dr. Ease's lavish home, her stomach churning. She stepped inside. She came out different, a new Amara. The grades changed overnight. That D+ was now an A-. At first, she felt numb, then ashamed, then angry, but eventually, she felt nothing at all. She stopped spending hours in the library. What was the point? Hard work was a fool's game. The real winners understood the system. The first time she approached another lecturer, it felt surreal. She had rehearsed the conversation 100 times in her head, but when she finally stood before Professor Bacco, she didn't need words. A lingering glance, a hesitant smile, and the silent language of understanding passed between them. It worked, and so she continued. She no longer feared exams, no longer panicked over grades. She got the best scores with minimal effort. She started dressing differently. New clothes, subtle makeup, a quiet confidence that resembled the golden girls she once envied. But there were consequences, the price of shortcuts, the loss of passion. The girl who once loved learning now barely skimmed through books. The joy of discovery, the thrill of intellectual challenge, it was gone. The isolation and the friends who once admired her discipline now watched her with quiet disapproval. Her roommates whispered about her, but she pretended not to care. The cheapening of self-worth. What once felt like an unthinkable compromise became routine. At some point, she stopped seeing herself as a victim and started believing she was in control. The diminishing returns. She was no longer special. As more girls followed the same path, the golden girl status became harder to maintain. Some lecturers grew bolder, crueler. Demands escalated. What once seemed like an exchange for good grades now felt like a contract she couldn't escape. The guilt. No amount of luxury erased the weight in her chest. Every time her mother called, proud of her brilliant daughter, Amara felt like a fraud. The breaking point one evening, as she stared at her reflection in a high-end boutique's mirror, holding a dress she could now afford, the weight of it all hit her. This wasn't her. She had come to Crestview with nothing but ambition and integrity. Now she was barely recognizable to herself. As she walked past a group of fresh-faced first years, she caught sight of a girl, eyes bright, hands clutching a pile of books, the same hunger for success in her expression that Amara once had. Something inside her cracked. Had she lost her way? And worse, was she now part of the problem? To be continued. Amara's story is far from over, but as she teeters between redemption and further descent, one thing is certain. Every choice has consequences. The question is, will she find the courage to reclaim herself? Or is it too late? Chapter 2. Daniela's Defiance. Daniela had always believed that hard work and integrity were enough to carve out success. From a young age, she understood struggle. Her mother, a cleaner at a law firm, worked double shifts to put her through school. "They can take everything from you," she always said, "but not your knowledge." Growing up in the bustling streets of Lagos, Daniela had seen many young girls lose themselves to desperation, but she had vowed to be different. Education was her escape, her weapon, her future. The dreamer who refused to settle. When she gained admission to Crestview University to study engineering, one of the toughest programs, she arrived with a quiet determination. Engineering was a field dominated by men, but she was undeterred. She wasn't the loudest in class, nor was she the most popular, but her work spoke for itself. Calculations, designs, technical reports, she devoured them all. While her peers struggled through equations, she found solace in the precision of numbers and the elegance of well-structured blueprints. Her routine was simple: mornings, lectures, note-taking, deep focus; afternoons, study groups, library sessions, practical workshops; evenings, revisions, assignments, quiet reflection. She wasn't naive. She had heard the stories, the murmurs of certain lecturers who traded grades for pleasure, but she believed she could succeed without bending to the system. Her resilience, however, would soon be tested. Professor Adekunle was a nightmare wrapped in authority. He wasn't just difficult, he was feared. Girls whispered about him in hushed tones. Boys smirked at his reputation. A wiry man with piercing eyes and a permanent smirk, he had built his throne in the engineering department, ensuring that no student passed his structural mechanics course without blessing. Daniela never paid attention to the warnings. She believed in merit, in fairness. She spent months working on her final project, a flawless bridge design that met every structural and environmental standard. It was, by all accounts, excellent. So when she checked her results and saw an F, her heart stopped. Her hands trembled as she walked into his office, her graded project in hand. "Sir, I deserve better," she said, her voice steady but firm. Professor Adekunle leaned back in his chair, studying her like a chess piece he was about to move. "You do." A long pause. "Then why?" His smirk deepened. "Let's talk at my place Friday, 9 p.m. Her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, to throw the graded script in his face. Report him? To whom? The dean was his close friend. The system was built to protect men like him. Refusing meant carrying over the course, possibly delaying her graduation. She was trapped. That Friday, she went, not as prey, but as a fighter. She would record everything. When Professor Adekunle opened the door, he wasn't dressed like a lecturer. A silk robe hung loosely over his shoulders, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Good girl," he murmured, motioning her inside. Her heart pounded as she subtly hit record on her phone, hidden deep in her bag. She sat on the couch, feigning nervousness. "Sir, about my grades." His smirk vanished. "You know how this works, Daniela. Don't play dumb." He moved closer, his hand gripping her thigh. She flinched. "No, sir, please." His grip tightened. When she tried to push him away, he grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward him. Fear paralyzed her for a second, then instincts kicked in. She fought, kicked, scratched, screamed, but he was stronger. He pushed her against the wall, his breath hot against her ear. Just as his grip loosened for a second, she seized the moment. Her knee shot up, hitting him where it hurt. He cursed, doubling over in pain. Daniela snatched her bag and ran. She didn't stop running, not until she was safe in her hostel, where she locked the door, curled into herself, and sobbed until there was nothing left. She could have stayed quiet. Many girls did, but Daniela refused. She reported him. She requested a remarking of her exam script. She demanded fairness. The system fought back. Her complaint disappeared. No action was taken against Professor Adekunle. Her grades mysteriously dropped in other courses. She was made to carry over multiple classes. Some lecturers suddenly found flaws in her work, giving her just enough to keep her from progressing. She became an outcast. Students whispered about her as she passed by. Some admired her bravery, but most avoided her, fearful of being associated with her battle. Every semester became a war, but she refused to break. Instead of giving up, Daniela worked harder. She retook every failed course, poring over textbooks with a new level of intensity. She joined study groups, found allies among students who still believed in fairness. She found support in a few lecturers who, though powerless against Adekunle, admired her courage. She refused to disappear. For every injustice, she responded with excellence. She aced every test, every project. No one could deny her brilliance. By her final year, the pressure on Adekunle had mounted. The whispers turned into louder voices. Another girl came forward with a similar experience, then another. Soon there was too much noise for the university to ignore. Professor Adekunle was quietly dismissed. And Daniela, she still graduated amongst the top of her class, not through shortcuts, not through favors, but through sheer, undeniable brilliance. Daniela paid a price for her defiance. She suffered. She was ostracized. She was almost broken. But in the end, she stood tall. The consequences of her fight were clear. By the time she graduated, more girls were speaking up. The school could no longer silence them all. She became a symbol of resistance. She paved the way for others. The system punished her. For choosing integrity over compliance, she was made to struggle harder than necessary. She lost friends. Many avoided her, afraid of being marked as troublemakers. She faced emotional trauma. The attempted assault, the victimization, it left scars, a legacy of defiance. As Daniela walked across the stage on graduation day, she caught sight of a few first-year students in the audience. Their eyes shone with admiration. She had given them something she never had, a reason to believe they could fight back. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. They can take everything from you, but not your knowledge. Daniela had fought the system, and won not with her body, but with her mind, and that was a victory no one could steal. Daniela's journey didn't end here, but one thing was certain. They couldn't break her.